Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and we are thrilled to welcome you to today's panel discussion, which is named "Create High-Value Internship Experiences and Get Intern Ready." My name is Pınar Çelik. I am the digital instructional designer at the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center. For those of you who may not know, the Nasdaq Center is a nonprofit that is building a better path for entrepreneurs worldwide by improving inclusion, access, and knowledge in entrepreneurship. As you may have seen in the chat, the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center, along with our partner Mentor Cloud, launched a free mentor matching platform for entrepreneurs that is called Mentor Makers. You can create your own advisory board to guide and inspire you with in-the-moment mentorship opportunities from topic experts and professionals dedicated to providing exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races, industries, and especially geographies. Together, we will build the greatest exchange of knowledge and expertise in service to entrepreneurs in business today. Find or become a mentor today by using the link in the chat that my colleague Anna will be posting. Entrepreneurs are the dreamers, doers, and visionaries who are not just solving the problems our community and world face today, but they are also those that will create a better future for all of us. So mentorship matters to all entrepreneurs. Their success is dependent on it. So we really value this opportunity, creating these environments for you all. So we will open up for live Q&A at the end of the event. Please feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A function that you can find at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation, and then we will address them at the end of the event. None of what we do could be possible without all of the amazing support from our sponsors, including Nasdaq, Lehigh University, Bank of the West, Airbnb, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, Woodruff Sawyer, BPM, and HubSpot. We are humbled by their contributions and support to all of the things that we do. During these unique times at the center, we are very curious to know how sentiment is among entrepreneurs that we work with, we serve to. We would like to start today's event by taking two polls that my colleague will be posting right now, flashing on the screen. If you could take a moment to answer these polls, these are very important for us to prepare for the future programming. So let's take a moment and poll. How are you feeling? How are you feeling today? Anxious, surviving, optimistic. That's great. Optimistic. That's great to hear and see. The second poll is coming up. What is keeping you up at night? Finance, sales, pivoting, surviving, right? So just so you know, we use the answers that you provide to these polls to create upcoming programming, both on demand and all the other workbooks and resources that the center provides. So we really appreciate your feedback and learning more about what you are looking for in terms of support. Without any further delay, please join me in giving the warmest welcome to our special guest, who will be also the moderator for today's panel, Dr. Sam Duvall, who is the managing director at Lehigh at Nasdaq Center. Sam, to you.
All right. Thank you for that warm welcome, Pinar, and welcome everyone. I am thrilled to be with you all today to facilitate this important conversation on creating high-value internship experiences in your organizations. Lehigh at Nasdaq Center is an innovative education industry partnership between Lehigh University and the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center in San Francisco. Together, we design educational experiences that develop the next generation of entrepreneurial thinkers and leaders, while simultaneously serving the talent development needs of emerging companies. We immerse students in the real world of entrepreneurship by partnering with early stage startups to design high value internship experiences. Through this process, students develop their entrepreneurial mindsets and skills while companies gain new perspectives from top talent interns ready to roll up their sleeves and help deliver value. Over the past 5 years, we've gathered insights from hundreds of student interns and dozens of host companies that led us to create the Intern Ready Workbook for managers. Today, we have a panel of interns, managers, and startup founders to share their insights and experiences with you. If you haven't already done so, be sure to download a copy of the workbook following our session today. And without further delay, I am thrilled to introduce our esteemed panel. So first up, we have Dave, who's a UI engineer at Netflix, Maya, head of customer success at Ecomedes, Ashleen, design and marketing at Electric Fish, and Naya, a business administration student at the University of Southern California. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. All right, so to get started, let's talk about how we prepare the way for high-value internship experiences. I'm going to start with our intern managers, Maya and Ashleen. So what is your motivation for bringing in student talent? And how do you identify company and project needs even before you bring interns in? Maya, let's start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a huge motivation for me is the fact that I did get a lot of help when I was in school and even when I was coming out of school from folks, and just the willingness that I saw from them to kind of mentor me and guide me in figuring out what I wanted to do after I finished school. That's a huge motivation for me. I really want to pay it forward, make sure that I'm, giving back to students that are also struggling with figuring out what they want to do and being exposed to the different options. And then in terms of identifying things early on, I think, at a startup, there is no lack of projects that can be worked on and things that need to be done. Oftentimes we're rolling up our sleeves ourselves and doing a lot of that. So we really just make a lot of lists over time, even the months leading up to it. If there are ideas or things that need to get done, we'll just kind of start adding it to the list. Not something we have time for right now, but definitely something we want to come back to. And then by the time the interns start, then we have kind of a whole list to start with, kick us off.
Fantastic. Thanks, Maya. And how about your experience, Ashleen?
I feel like I should be writing more lists, but I feel similarly that there's at a startup, especially like ours with a small team, there's so many projects. And full disclosure, I don't have like a ton of experience managing interns. So what I did when I was seeking people out and setting up these internships was basically provide a description of the company, what we do, and where we are exactly right now. So describe the broad strokes of the projects that we have. But we almost benefit from having so much work to do that then I kind of like pitched it to these students at career fairs or when we were connected. And then we asked them to come back and say, how do you feel that you can contribute the most, or what excites you the most? And just tried to match up those mutual needs to be mutually rewarding.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely designing those mutually beneficial, mutually rewarding internship experiences are what part of what create the high value experience. So we know that student interns want to impress their managers and host companies, and they thrive with clarity around business goals and expectations. So what do you do in each of your companies to set students up for success in their internships? Ashleen, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so like I said, we do a lot of contextualizing at the very beginning to say, first of all, our project or our product is kind of dense. So we have to provide a lot of context around that. And then the specific goals that we have for this quarter or the ensuing ones, however long this intern is going to be with us. And so I think just laying it out really clearly, writing it down. Literally, we benefit from a lot of tools that are given to startups like this workbook. And so we're really not reinventing the wheel. We're just kind of like following the best practices that have been set for us.
Great, thanks. And Maya?
I think just to kind of piggyback off that, definitely be really clear about the expectations that you're setting. I think that it's really hard, coming into a new role anywhere, right? Whether you're an intern, entry level, or something that you've had experience with for years, if whoever you're working with isn't setting extremely clear expectations, it can be really hard to deliver on that. And being in the client success world, it's kind of taking the lessons that we've learned, even in working with clients and external facing folks, to say, okay, how can we make sure that we're being successful, setting those expectations early on? And sometimes it's not a really concrete metric, but it's more so something like, as long as you are contributing and, adding value in terms of just perspective and engagement and those types of things, if that is your expectation as an intern manager and that's what you're looking for to get out of the relationship, then just talking about that early on, writing it down, I think is a really good idea as well. And just making sure you're being extra clear. You can't over communicate enough. I think you're on mute, Sam.
Thank you. Maya, you mentioned something really important, and that's the idea of interns adding value, right? So they are there to learn, develop, and grow, but they're really there to add value, and they are hungry for meaningful work. So one of the beauties that we found in interning for a startup is that you really do have the ability to make an impact. So what do you specifically do during the internship that helps your intern connect what they're working on to the business operations and the company mission, big picture? Maya, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so this is something that I think, I definitely struggled with the first time that I hosted interns. I was really new. I was like the sixth person at the company. I didn't really know, what was going on. And so being able to communicate the impact that they were having was a tough thing. And you're right, that's something that they're really, really, engaged in. And they want to be able to say, okay, this is the project that I worked on and this is the impact it had to the company. Because overall, that's what they're going to be, speaking to when they're talking about their experience to future employers. So being really, really clear about, and starting with, I like to do this thing called ohming it out that I learned when I was a counselor at a summer camp, where you start with the outcome. So if you're telling them about a new project, saying, okay, so this project, the overall goal is to, increase client engagement with their analytic reports, whatever it is. And the method that we're going to go about doing that is, setting up some outbound campaigns so that they can see, even though the project may be tedious and they can't really see the clear path to what that value is going to be, just really laying that out and kind of starting with the goal instead of starting with the method to get there.
Great. Ashleen?
Yeah, I relate so closely to that sentiment because, again, this was my first time managing sort of a cohort of interns. And some of this class that's going back to school now, we just had a demo day for them last week. And a lot of the feedback that we got on that day was that they loved that they knew that their contributions were going to really contribute to the success of the company. They're so small, they know that everything that they commit is going to be actually utilized by us. And obviously they speak with their friends and fellow students, so they know that their compatriots at other companies, larger companies that do internships a slightly different way, are basically, I think for especially the developers, they know that they're having their code thrown away at the end. And that's just the way that they do things there, but they feel a little bit sad about it. And so I think definitely sort of that empowerment and connecting them more closely to say, hey, this vision that we're going to deliver, you really had a part in doing that. That being said, I do think that some of the feedback that we got was that it was exciting how much they are contributing, but we do need to do a better job, I think, because our team is dispersed with remote. It can be difficult as well. So one thing that we started doing is weekly, all hands check-ins, including those interns, including everybody, to say, these are the goals and this is what we're doing. And that's something that we learned through trial and error from this internship class.
Yeah, excellent advice. Maya, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I have one other thing to share that I think hopefully people that work, at a startup or just with a small team can relate to, is when, you're coming into a new team, the reality is all folks on a small team, whether you are a manager, a department head, you're all rolling up your sleeves and doing really tedious projects. And I think that is kind of, there's a lack of understanding around that. And so oftentimes I like to just tell stories of things that I did recently that weren't my favorite task, were really tedious and didn't seem all that important, and kind of being able to relate to them and letting them know that they can relate to you. And it's not just that, you're giving them the hard tasks or the boring tasks or the tedious tasks, like you're also doing those things on the side, making sure that that's kind of mutual.
Yeah, and I think definitely connecting back that all tasks are contributing in a meaningful way. Just knowing that, I think, helps also the student interns connect with the work. So let's hear from some of our student interns. We've got Dave and Naya. So super curious just to hear from you both. What were your expectations going into an internship, and was the experience what you expected? Dave, let's start with you.
Sure. So I had a few different internships, some at more of a startup environment and others at a larger tech firm. And I think the one thing that I was expecting the most was just to learn a lot. And that really meant different things when it came to interning at a startup versus like a big company. I think with the startup experience, I didn't expect how cross-functional my learning would be, just based on the fact that I was kind of hired to intern in a specific area. But I think as we went along, I learned a lot more about different parts of the business and how the business thinks about delivering value to its customers and consumers, which was really great. So yeah, just to learn a ton, and I was kind of surprised by the breadth of the learning that I got out of the experiences there.
Great, thanks, Dave. And how about you, Naya?
Hi. Really similar to Dave. I think just really going into it, just expecting to learn a lot, but then also kind of had no expectations really, because it was during, like, my first internship was during COVID. It was my second semester of my freshman year. Everything was online and it was just a whole new experience. So I really didn't know what to expect, but just went into it just super open-minded and ready to learn as much as I could. Because one, like, I was in community college, like it was online, but just really reminding myself that it was a great opportunity and that I'm going to like benefit so much from learning and learning from other people's experiences, especially like the managers, just employees, anybody. I was just super, like you said earlier, I was super hungry to learn and just be in the industry, taking my first steps, like especially out of high school too. It was a whole new experience. So I was just very excited and again, just really ready to learn.
Yeah, it's an excellent entrepreneurial mindset to carry into an internship. So we know how important the onboarding process is, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But I want to hear from Naya and Dave, what were some of the key strategies or steps that your intern managers and host companies took to set you up for success in your internship? And is there anything you wish you would have had more of? Naya, let's start with you.
Sorry, I got cut out. But I could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know how important the onboarding process is, and really, helping interns get set up for success. So what are some of the strategies and steps that your intern managers or host companies took to set you up for success in your internships? And is there anything that you wish you would have had more of?
Yeah, so with this specific internship, the first one I had with the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center, I had a really great professor that was a mentor to me, and just having a mentor and somebody to always go back to, and he was my advisor for the program as well. So got to work really closely with him, but just asking as many questions and him being so open to me asking all those questions, and then so open to going like above and beyond and just giving me any advice or help on any projects that I was working on. That was like super important to me, and is something that like I hope every starting intern has to like lean back to. But just overall, like the process and like the support throughout the entire internship is what was most important to me, and just having like any manager or supervisor asking me like if there's anything like they could do to support me, or just like overall it's the support that is like what got me through the entire program. And knowing that like a company cared that much about someone who is like just an intern but is like so much more than that.
Yeah, echoing what Naya said, I think like support was definitely the biggest thing for me in terms of onboarding and feeling acclimated into both like a large setting at a big company and a startup. I think having different degrees of support is really important too, like both from having support from the manager in terms of like what are the expectations and what is kind of the value that you're being asked to deliver, with your mentor to get the understanding and experience of how to get and deliver that value. But also, I think it's important to have support with your other interns, just because they're the people who are kind of closest to what you're experiencing at this new place, at this new company, which is really important as well. I also think like another big thing that more larger companies do is really well is providing context about the company in general and how kind of like the company culture is and operates. I think that's really important to communicate to the interns, just so that they get a sense of what the company kind of prides itself in terms of culture, and how, you know, how kind of the interns kind of fit into that culture, and how they can kind of deliver based on that culture as well. So I think that's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. You both touch on some really important points around support, and you mentioned different layers of support. So you've got the peer-to-peer support, so the opportunity to connect with other interns that are either at the company or perhaps participating in a program that you are. Your manager support, you know, your manager is there to also serve as a guide and a coach. That's something that we've heard over and over from interns that has been really helpful. And then if there's an opportunity like for Naya, she had a mentor outside of the company who was someone for her to check in with as well. So that multiple layers of support, we've also seen be very successful across our student programs as well. And then certainly exposure, getting up to speed on the company, the mission, et cetera. So Dave, you actually opened the door to a really excellent question that I now have for Maya and Ashleen around, you know, again, we know how important the onboarding experience is, and usually internships are fairly short, right? Like we might be talking about a 10-week internship. So the runway is short and you want to get them up to speed quickly. So what are some steps that you've taken in your companies to get students up to speed quickly on your company, the industry, and the project that they'll be undertaking, or projects they'll be undertaking over the several weeks of their internship? So Maya, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I definitely learned quickly from just a logistics standpoint, try to get them set up with everything before they start. So, you know, we know that they're starting in a couple of weeks, get them emails for the company, set them up on add them to all the tools, the Slack, the, you know, Asana, whatever it is, just so that we don't have to kind of waste that first week on admin stuff. Even though, you know, it feels like it might be a simple thing, it really takes up a lot of time because they're just kind of sitting there waiting. And if you are, you know, having to wait on a few admin things, give them some material. Like I have a list of material things to read and to watch. And then I always ask them to just think of 5 questions or come up with 5 questions from those resources that they can ask me. And I also think it's really important to start interns on projects that are going to kind of overall have that, you know, cascading effect of it taught them something early on. It really, even if it was a simple project, like it kind of explained something that is hard to explain with words, and it taught them something about the organization and the work they're going to be doing later on that really set them up for, you know, success or more advanced projects further on in the internship.
And Ashleen?
Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty similar for us. There is a lot of explaining, like I mentioned earlier, to do just about the whole problem space. So I guess before I even get to that point, when we're speaking with potential internship candidates, we really are most, just regardless of skill set, we're most interested in the people that seem excited about the mission, because it's just one of those things where we're such a small team, we almost can't afford to have people that don't care as much as we do. So it helps to kind of, they're already halfway there if they're interested. And then I do a lot of sessions in the beginning. Again, on our team, it's small, so it's mostly me, but our whole team of co-founders will kind of fill in. And we just have these sessions, we get all the interns on, and we do a couple of slides and whatever, but it's really just a talk. And I kind of like almost gossip about power infrastructure to them. And I just say, here in human terms is what we're talking about, so they can feel, again, like our excitement. And then when they're there, then we start talking about the specifics of the projects. And like Dave said, we have had some of our interns move to different, like, for example, they're software developers, but they've been doing data engineering projects for us, or they're data people, but they're working on marketing and technical writing and stuff. And what we did was just ask people to meet with describe all the members of the team. Hey, this is everyone, these are the projects. Who do you think you'd want to talk to? Have a chat with them, see what they're doing. And then if you think you can also contribute to this, just let us know. We'll put it on right away, That's kind of it.
Excellent, thank you. So let's dive into talking specifically about the projects for a moment. So I want to hear first from the intern managers, what steps do you take? Like, what does the process actually look like to scope projects for interns? And is it, one big project for the whole semester or whole internship? Or is it several smaller projects? Do they evolve over time? Can you talk about the initial scoping and then how the projects may evolve throughout the course of the internship? So Maya?
Yeah, definitely for us, typically smaller projects, just because we work at a really rapid pace as a startup. So, projects don't take necessarily more than 1 to 2 weeks if we're working on them. Sometimes I will make it a little bit bigger. So if I have this kind of task or project that I need help with, I'll turn it into something that can be more of a learning lesson for them, such as, okay, take the data analysis that you did and now put it in a slide deck that you're going to present to the chief team or whatever it is, just because I think it's a good opportunity to kind of have them, present information at a high level based on what they learned. But ultimately smaller projects, and I kind of live by the 80-20 rule. So I think that having them take a first stab at something, setting expectations and letting them know what you want out of this, but ultimately giving them the freedom to say, okay, I'm just going to try, right? And then even if it's not aligned with what you were envisioning or expecting, still letting them know that you appreciate the effort that they put in, and that you're wanting them to kind of iterate on it and head more in a different direction. And yeah, just really because I think it is fun to kind of give them that creative freedom of, here's this challenge that we're trying to solve. Here's a few parameters, some information that you can use to figure it out. But ultimately, it's kind of up to you, because that is what it's like to work in the real world. Nobody's really, setting you up with do X, Y, and Z to solve the problem.
Yeah, I think this is one area where we really relied, especially for myself, on those tools and best practices and things like Workbook and other resources, because I just set up, for example, 30, 60, 90-day plans for interns that we had over the entirety of the summer. And Sam, like you mentioned earlier, sometimes there are interns that will be only for a 10-week session. And as a small team, we're always happy to get that help, because a lot of times it'll be, through a certain program. So the interns are covered by some program, but they can only join for this amount of time. And the limits of their expertise or skills are this. And so then it's about looking at kind of maybe like a list, like Maya mentioned, of what are the things that we need to get done and matching those up with the best fit, and trying to manage those people sort of at a more appropriate pace for 10 weeks versus every month we're going to have this and you have a more regular manager and stuff like that. But it's really the tools that saved the day.
Yeah, excellent. And speaking of tools, so back to the workbook, there is actually a project scoping template in the workbook. So if you haven't downloaded it yet, that's something that we have found to be really helpful in at least getting the project started and matching interns to project needs and opportunities based on skills, interests, etc. So there is a tool for that in the workbook, so check it out. So let's hear from Dave and Naya. Again, back to the conversation earlier, we talked about one of the beauties of interning with a startup is that you have the opportunity to make an impact and have your work be, really felt in the organization. And we also know and have heard from students that they really crave meaningful work. So I want to hear from each of you. What's a project or projects that you've worked on in your internship that you really felt connected to kind of the mission of the organization and you felt the impact of your work in the company? Can you give an example of something that you've worked on? Dave?
Yeah, I think the one that comes to mind was my internship with You Globally, which is a startup based in the Netherlands that essentially works to help companies expand to new international markets. And their model before COVID, so I had this internship the summer of COVID. Their model before COVID was to fly people out and kind of get them introduced into the entrepreneurial ecosystem of the new location. And so when COVID hit, they were trying to kind of adapt to that model and do those offerings. And so as interns, our first tasks were to kind of update the website and add new ways to have that happen in the near future. And I think we quickly realized that because also the pandemic was a longer term thing and it wasn't going to just last a few months, that we needed to kind of overhaul the entire offering of You Globally at that point because of the new shift to virtual work. And so I think for us interns, one of the best parts of that experience was the openness that the founders had we had like a project scoped in the beginning and we were working on that, but we kind of, as we went through it and, as we worked through it, we kind of realized, hey, this project is actually a lot larger in scope than we originally thought. How do you guys feel if we kind of take this from a bigger picture and see how we can pivot the entire offering of the company to more virtual friendly and things like that? And they were extremely receptive. And that's kind of like what I got the most value out of was thinking on a broader scale of the product and testing our hypotheses and doing that customer research of what resonates kind of with the audiences that they're already targeting. So that project was probably the most chaotic, but the most fun project that I've had to do in my internships over the years.
Yeah, and Dave, I think that's such a beautiful lesson for future interns. You guys didn't just take your project at face value. You asked really good questions, like really smart questions, and turned it into a much larger strategic project. And you were advising the founders on company strategy. So I think this is a lesson for both interns and host companies is that, Maya, like you said earlier, kind of give that creative freedom. But also interns like challenge assumptions, ask good questions. And if you see opportunities to create value, you could surprise everybody. And I think you guys did that early on, Dave, and the rest of your internship, probably you were given much more strategic level, projects and able to really contribute in big ways because you kind of stepped outside of the norm and said, well, hey, what about this? And that's, again, the beauty of interns being able to bring those fresh new perspectives. So if you're open to welcoming those, they can create a lot of value, those fresh perspectives in your organization. So Naya, how about you? What's a project that you worked on where you really felt made, an impact in the organization?
Yeah, it was like my initial idea was like the thing that you said about like the perspective of an intern and how important that is. Because I think companies, like whether they're like a big company or like a new company, whether doesn't matter, they are looking for the perspective of the people who are their target markets. And this summer I got to be at Snapchat, and their user base is like from 13 to 24, and that's their target, and that's where I fall in, and that's where a lot of the other interns fell in as well. So they really use that to their advantage, and we got to look for like different gaps of like where things weren't working for them, and like specifically in, I think it was like their Snap originals, so that wasn't a big thing on the app. And from our perspective, we were able to tell them like where the gaps were to help them make the product better. And like you said, like with the creative freedom, they also really did value like our ideas and again, like our hunger to just make and like be a part of these projects. So I think the thing that I was most proud of was at the end of the well, like a month before we finished, we got to work with I was a marketing intern, so we got to work with 2 design interns and then 2 software engineer interns, and we got to develop and mock up and pitch a new feature for Snapchat to just conceptualize if they wanted to, but we came up with a feature that really like targeted students and developing their skill sets, whether it's like just as like individuals or for their careers, by creating like specific communities, and it actually, the concept of it did get developed, and the badges of it all, like it's all like a feature now on Snapchat. It just like came out, I think like 2 weeks ago. But that was like something that was super exciting because like they liked our idea and kind of made it their own, but like still like really gave into like hearing our input and our ideas, even like throughout the entire internship. So that was something that's really special because you think that as an intern, like you might not matter. And like something Maya said earlier was that like some tasks might be tedious or just like don't feel important. But like at the end of it, like you can see the impact that you've made. And again, like whether if it's a small or big company, like you're still making a really big impact with your unique perspectives and insight.
Yeah, that's so awesome, Naya. And that's a beautiful example of the sort of the win-win or the mutually beneficial high value internship experience. Not only did you gain incredible experience, through that, but you created incredible value for the company in the process. And that's a great example. So thank you both for sharing. We are coming up on our time for Q&A. So I just want to ask, 1 or 2 more questions to our panelists. And I see we have a lot of great questions in the Q&A box. If you haven't had a chance to put a question in there yet, please do so while we're wrapping up with our panelists. But something we talk a lot about is that feedback is a gift. And certainly in an internship experience, feedback flowing both ways is a gift. So let's hear first from our internship managers. What are some of the strategies you utilize to provide feedback to your interns? Because we know giving feedback isn't always the easiest thing to do. So Maya.
Yeah, so obviously I give a lot of feedback just in conversation and in discussion on individual projects, but we also do, midway through the internship program, we'll do a write-up feedback. I think it's a good experience, both for me as an intern manager, for any folks on my team that are also involved in the management of the interns. We have everybody try to write, 3 or 4 sentences in terms of strengths and areas for improvements, and just go over it, with the interns and say, hey, read this, let me know if you agree, or if anything, didn't necessarily jive with you, if you don't agree with, or if there's anything that we missed, right? If there's an area of improvement or an opportunity that you haven't had to, develop a certain skill set that you want to, making sure they have, the chance to kind of give you that feedback. And also feedback goes both ways, right? So always asking for feedback from your interns. When I first got interns, I had never managed people in that way before. And that was an incredible learning experience that I needed before I was able to hire people full-time and manage them as well. So definitely write-ups are always a great thing. They're never a waste of time because they can always be turned into a letter of recommendation later on too.
That's good advice. Thanks, Maya. Ashleen?
Yeah, pretty similar. Again, the tools, really shout out to them, but these 30, 60, 90-day plans that we do, we tailor questions, to our business and our use case, but it's really all written out for me. So what we decided to do for this summer was to do in the first month a little bit more feedback from the intern to us. What do you think about the project? How's it working? Are these tools? How's the communication with your manager and the team? And then tried to refine based on that feedback. And then after the second month of their internship, it was a little bit more like we had a written feedback form, just a 1-pager from, every manager that they interacted with. And it was a little bit more us giving back to them. But, like Maya said, you try to do it in between. There's a lot of opportunities. It doesn't have to be on the calendar.
Yeah, so ongoing feedback, but also being intentional about that midway check-in and writing some feedback down, and feedback flowing both ways. So I'd like to hear from Naya and Dave what your experience has been with both receiving feedback from your intern managers and also providing feedback to your intern managers. So Naya, let's start with you.
I think feedback can be a really scary thing at first. And I think it's something you have to get used to and comfortable with. Because, I mean, if you're doing something wrong, it kind of will hurt sometimes. I think for the first time, especially starting an internship, when you get that first thing of feedback where a manager didn't like exactly what you might have done, or you might have done something wrong, and it is scary. But it's super beneficial, and it's just something that you have to understand is for the best, for your personal and career growth overall. So it's really one of the most valuable things to receive. And then I think even giving feedback as well is another just valuable thing to any manager as well, because they're also looking for opportunities for growth, whether it's for themselves or for the company as a whole. So it can be scary, but it is super, super valuable.
Yeah, I have two thoughts on this. I think one part of feedback that's often not talked about enough is the culture of feedback at a company. I think it's really important to create psychological safety where people know that when you're giving feedback and receiving feedback, it's not a personal attack, but it's more about they're looking out for the best interest for you and your work and how you can perform better as a contributor into the company. And I think doing that and having radical transparency as well, where people can give feedback at any point, is really important. I think I once thought when the feedback cycles would come that it was the scary thing and it was all this stuff that I maybe was not aware about just coming at once. But I think what's really helped is asking for feedback on a more consistent basis and not waiting for a period for that to happen. I think one of the things that drew me to Netflix was that we don't have performance evaluations that happen every year. It's more of a constant cycle of feedback where everybody communicates with each other, and even the leaders I think are held more accountable than the people fresh out of college or interning, just because they're the ones that kind of push the feedback that they get about themselves first. And then it's a very open forum in which people are able to share. So I think having a really good culture of feedback is important, because then it seems like a less scary thing and it doesn't accumulate all at once, but you are constantly looking for smaller ways to just improve your workflow and how you're able to kind of iterate on yourself and become a better contributor. So yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Dave. That's actually a really great point, and a perfect segue to, in fact, the first question that we have in our Q&A chat box. We'll transition now to the audience questions. So you talked about culture, Dave, and understanding the culture of an organization, and particularly when it comes to feedback. So our first question is, with respect to culture and ethos, how do you convey such to your interns? And then also we've talked about facilitating connections, within the company. So Maya and Ashleen, if you'd like to share, how you convey your culture and ethos to your interns. And I'd also be curious to hear from Dave and Naya, what are some ways you found effective when companies communicated their culture and ethos to you beyond, the website? So we'll start with Ashleen and Maya first. Any thoughts?
Yeah, so what we do is just a pretty straight up overview in the beginning of the mission, vision, values, and we're pretty conscientious about trying to keep those values applicable, A, to the product, and B, to the organization. We don't want to kind of lose sight of that. So it is pretty big for us and we hammer that in. But one thing that I definitely have learned over this past summer is that if you institute this sort of do as I say, not as I do, it doesn't really matter. Interns realize when we work on the weekends, or when we take meetings from the car or whatever it is, and that starts to seep in, even if we say, make sure that you take breaks and I don't want to see you on Slack on the weekend or whatever. If they know that we're there, it's a little bit hard for them to feel like, that's the norm. So it has been also a wake-up call to us that you have to also embody it yourself.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is just being, real and genuine with them and totally transparent. I think one of the most interesting things about startup culture is that as a small team, every single person has such a big impact to the culture, right? Your culture could shift overnight because of one new team member, right? So, just being transparent about that and just being really, really open with them. I've always really appreciated when folks are really transparent and open with me about things. And that includes also sharing the things that you have challenges with, even if that's like a communication challenge internally. I think that everything is a really great learning lesson for them, and it's it doesn't serve them to be avoidant in regards to any conflict that comes up, whether it's an internal struggle or something that you're facing externally. So using that as an opportunity for a learning lesson and just being transparent with them about how you went about it, whether you agree with how you went about it, maybe you have things that you'd like to change or would do it differently moving forward, can just be a really, really helpful thing.
How about from Naya or Dave? Any thoughts on what you found effective in terms of the company communicating their culture and ethos to you?
I can go for this one. I think something that Snapchat did really well this summer was just showing how excited and like proud they were of like the product itself. Like when we first came in, like I was shocked, but like anytime like I had like a coffee chat or like somebody like a chat with an employee, they would ask me for my Snapchat instead of like asking for like an email. So like being like really like into the product itself, and overall just a part of like their mission is just having fun. And that's exactly what I felt at the company as like while I was there. And I think just sticking to the like mission and like really, and again, embodying that was what like really helped me understand and also be a part of the company culture.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Especially like at Twitter and Netflix, I think people really lean into the product as a way to kind of demonstrate the culture. Like I think one of the fun things that we do at Netflix is each of our meeting rooms are themed off of a different show. And so usually when you have like a meeting of some sort or a presentation, there's Stranger Things, there's Ozark, there's different shows that are kind of incorporated as part of the presentation, which keeps the culture really fun when people are kind of into the work that they're doing and that they're producing. I also think what Ashleen said about like mission, vision, values is really important, and being like upfront about that and having everybody from even like the top leadership kind of embody those values. I think is really critical in all parts of like their daily work routine. One of the things that I've been thinking about like recently is diversity and inclusion, and how I've kind of seen that done differently at different companies. And I think in more of the successful places, it's an intentional effort that happens at weekly team meetings. It happens in coffee chats. It happens in all parts of the different kind of routine of working, versus like at other companies where there might be like employee resource groups and things like that, where people can join those communities, but it's almost self-selective, because if you care about diversity and inclusion, you're going to go to those groups, and if you're not, then you might not, have exposure to that conversation. And so I think it's really important for cultural values to like be incorporated in many different parts of what's expected kind of on a daily basis when you conduct business.
Yeah, thanks to each of you for answering that question. So a couple themes that I heard. One is modeling the way, so kind of walk the talk, and two, be intentional. So really, really great advice. So another question that we have from the audience is actually one that we hear quite often is NDAs and how to handle NDAs with interns. So do you follow sort of your pre-existing structure and systems, or in the case of a company's product creation, do they own what they create? So the question essentially boils down to, how do you handle NDAs, and who owns the IP? So I can certainly touch on this, but I'd love to hear first from each of you. So Maya, Ashleen, how do you guys handle NDAs in your organizations?
Yeah, we have interns sign an NDA. Ultimately, they're going to be dealing with data that is our client's data. It's privileged data, right? And so, we want to make sure that we protect that.
And yes, thank you, Pinar. An NDA is a non-disclosure agreement.
Yeah,
Ashleen?
we do the same. This is just one area in which, again, like, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an HR lawyer. So I always just try like best practice, whatever is sort of the cleanest and clearest and safest. And while it is good to like encourage the interns to have ownership of their work, we definitely wouldn't hand over like total responsibility of a certain product, especially something integral, and just say, here you go. There would definitely be some sort of checkpoints before we get to that point.
Yeah. And how about Dave and Naya? Do you have experience being asked to sign NDAs?
Yeah, I had to sign an NDA for every internship, but I think like the good mental model that I've kind of employed throughout the years is like, if the CEO of the company were to ask, like, if you were talking about something potentially confidential and you were to tell the CEO of the company, how would they react, kind of thing, to that? And so usually, like, if I check myself when talking about anything sensitive, that's kind of the mental model that I do of like, would this be, information that would help our competitors or things like that? So yeah.
Yeah, exactly what Dave said. I also had, for all of my internships, had to sign an NDA. I think it's just a part of the process. But I mean, as an intern, it's really exciting because like you do like hear about some projects that like a company is working on, and that's super exciting. But then it's also something that the company has like been working for a long time, that like needs to be put out on its own and not by an intern like telling somebody else or an employee telling somebody else. It's like a project that like a company's like been super proud of and like working on, and takes a lot of work to work on different projects like that. So I like NDAs are sometimes just very necessary part of the process.
Yeah, definitely. Very, very common and very necessary in a lot of circumstances, particularly in startups where you are building something new. So generally we see companies keep and own their IP, and it's very common for them to have the student interns sign NDAs directly. So next question, we have a question from a freelancer or a solopreneur, a one-person firm who would like to hire an intern and, open to any kind of assistance. Do you think an internship experience would be beneficial for the intern in such a small business? Do any of you have experience you could share interning in a small, either one-person firm, or thoughts on our advice for this entrepreneur?
I think as long as there's enough work and as long as there's enough projects, it's always going to be valuable. Ultimately, I remember, being a student, right? You're just hungry for things to put on your resume that look good. And so that in itself can be a huge value add, and just having someone that's, willing to recommend you for your next job. So if you have enough work, enough projects to put them on, then definitely valuable for both parties.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Maya.
I think it's good as long as you give them, as long as they know what they're getting into, it can actually be great. I think some people really thrive in a sort of like a one-on-one, almost like apprenticeship type of role. And even sometimes inside of larger organizations, you can have that if you work on a small team or you work with just one manager. I've worked inside of big businesses on a 3-person team, and it felt very small and still got a lot of utility from that.
Yeah. And one of the insights we share in the workbook that we've heard from students is that it's especially important that the intern manager have the time and ability to provide that one-to-one mentorship, guidance, coaching. So, if you're the CEO of the company, ask yourself the question, do I have the time to dedicate to providing that one-on-one manager-intern relationship? I think, that's important. Anything else to add for that one, Dave or Naya? Nope. Okay, excellent. So one more question, and then we will wrap up our conversation for the day. So, with respect to cultivating critical thinking skills, soft skills in an internship experience, we know that, interns are there as part of their learning journey. So what are some of, challenges, surprises, expectations around the skill development aspect of the internship experience? So that learning journey. So for Maya and Ashleen, what are some of the steps that you take to help cultivate skills development for students? And Dave and Naya, what has that experience been like for you guys? So we'll start with Maya and Ashleen.
Yeah, I think ultimately the art of storytelling is really what comes to mind here. I think that no matter how technical the project that you're working on, if you're, setting them up for success and being able to translate that to different audiences, which is top of mind for me in my job, because as somebody in client success, you're talking to a lot of different types of audiences. And I think that as a skill set is so translatable to any job you're going to have, any project you're going to work on. So making sure that there's different components of each project, there's the technical component, there's kind of the report at a high level component, and then there's actually the articulation of what you learned is I think the best way to make sure that you hit all of the skill sets that Sam just mentioned.
Yeah, we definitely kind of fly by the seat of our pants. So sometimes what's been helpful is to have interns themselves do some market research for us. If, say, for example, we're considering a new tool and say, why don't you guys do an analysis as the person who will likely be using this and come back and advise. And so, that has opened us up to some softwares and some tools, things that we didn't consider previously, but ended up being the best for us. So sometimes we just ask the interns themselves to kind of inform that research. But yeah, they probably see it modeled by the rest of the team, and that we are all developing new skills every day.
Great. Dave or Naya, anything to add?
Yeah, I think what's been really successful for me is having an objective coming in of what a startup might be looking for, but having the flexibility to kind of try to achieve that objective in different ways. And through that, having the discovery of what I really enjoy as part of my work as you go along. And I think the beauties of working at a startup is that because things are moving so fast and so quickly, there's a lot of opportunity in a lot of different areas. And I think if I had a startup internship that was very rigid and kind of just was very driven on, this is kind of the task that we need you to do, it would have been less productive for me, just because I wouldn't have discovered the things that I had done in different areas as part of that same objective. So I think it's a really good opportunity to have interns try things in a lot of different areas and encourage them to push hard in those areas that they really want to focus on, as long as it's delivering value to the business in some way. So yeah.
Yeah. Just quickly, I think as for cultivating skills as an intern, you first going into an internship, you might feel like you have to know everything going in. But it's all a very big learning process, and you don't have to know everything, especially for college students. We don't need to have everything figured out, and a lot of the time it feels like we do have to. But just again, giving yourself that constant reminder that you're here to learn, you're an intern, and this is a whole new experience for you. Managers don't expect you to know everything, and I think the best thing is managers being super supportive and just eager to help you out.
Awesome. Well, thank you to each of you for sharing your incredible knowledge and insights and experiences on how you either participated in or helped create high value internship experiences. Unfortunately, we are at the end of our time. So if you want more information, and we've referenced tools and resources quite a bit throughout this conversation, so definitely check out the workbook that we've posted here in the chat. There's a lot of good guidance and even tools and frameworks for how you can implement high-value internship experiences in your organization. So thanks again to our panelists, and back over to you, Pinar.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you so much for moderating this incredible, engaging, and insightful panel discussion. And thank you so much, our panelists, for making the time in their days and then being here with us. And on behalf of the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center and everyone in attendance today, we sincerely thank you for joining us. So before we let you go, I also would like for you to join us for the upcoming webinars. You can view the upcoming events by using the link in the chat that Anna graciously posting. Thank you all so much for joining us today and being part of this journey, and hopefully things will be getting smoother in the upcoming internship sessions for your companies, and also if you're an intern for your next internship journey. Take care.